remember in the spring, we were talking about public purchasing, and I said that I would finish it up this fall by talking about public works. So that's really what I'm going to do for the next 15 minutes or so. And what I really wanted, both out of the public purchasing and out of the public works, is to give you an area where you could go to immediately. I know a lot of times we'll get questions, and even though the laws are fairly contained in one area, people are like, oh, now where was that I read about small purchases, and where is that? And the attorneys will call too, and they'll be like, well, where is that at? So we're hoping with these presentations that it'll be kind of a quick reference guide. And today there's some very, I didn't include all of the statutes right away, so I want to be able to provide those so you can write those in an appropriate place. So again, like I said, in the fall, we talked about the public purchasing laws, which are under IC 5-22. And if you need to get that PowerPoint, I was pretty good about putting all the various statutes that apply to things like small purchases, special purchasing, or bought agreements, those types of things. And that is still online, so you can still go to our website under meeting materials for the spring conference and download that if you need to. So then for public works, that's just a little bit different than public purchasing. For counties, the statutes govern that are found under IC 36-1-12, and it starts out with definitions, which are always a good thing to have. The definitions can be found under IC 36-1-12-1.2 and under -2. And it talks about what a board means, and the board is the board or officer having the power to award contracts for public works. A lot of times that is the commissioners. Sometimes there are exceptions with that. So that's something that your attorney, and that's one thing that you always want to make sure of when it comes to these public works projects, that you've got your attorney involved in with this. So, and I think most of you do. What is a public work? It's a construction, reconstruction, alteration, or renovation of a public building, airport facility, or other structure that is paid for out of a public fund or special assessment. And this term includes the construction, alteration, or repair of a highway, street, bridge, sewer, drain, you know, you name it. When it comes to something that's solid, either a road or a building, then you're talking about a public works. And then it does give a good definition for public fund. Sometimes we're not thinking about what that means exactly. And it is all funds derived from established revenue sources of a political subdivision and deposited in a special or the general fund. This does not include funds received by a person under a BOT, which is a governmental body, and operating contract and transfer back agreement, or bonds payable exclusively by a private entity, because sometimes you'll get involved in working with a private entity. So those are excluded. IC 36-1-12-5 provides for public work projects estimated to cost less than $50,000. If the contract to be awarded, it can be bid as required under IC 36-1-12-4, which is the bidding process, the big complicated, you know, going through everything. But what you generally more than likely will do, it also may it allows for inviting quotes from at least 3 persons known to deal with that type of work. And of course, that has the standard requirements that you cannot require that person to submit the quote before the meeting at which the quotes are to be received, and it must be read aloud at the public meeting. And it also has to be awarded to the lowest responsible and responsive quoter. You may reject all of the quotes. And if you reject, the board may negotiate and enter into agreements for the work in an open market without inviting or receiving quotes, but that must say why all the quotes were rejected. And that's what we would be looking for in an audit if you go down that trail, is why that you rejected all of it. So if the project is to cost less than $25,000, then you may also solicit 3 quotes by phone, which is the easiest one, and we do see that. There are some other requirements if it's for resurfacing. So you'll want to look at the statute to make sure that you don't have some additional requirements for resurfacing. Sorry about that. For projects that are less than $150,000, you can use your own workforce. This is found under IC 36-1-12-5, subsection E. The board may perform the public work without awarding a contract and may purchase supplies under the purchasing law, under 5-22. So that is allowable. First of all, you have to have the staff that's capable of doing it. So, and I know you wouldn't want to have anything less than that. When it comes to thinking about the cost, it includes the actual cost of labor, materials, equipment, and rental use of trucks and heavy equipment owned, and all other expenses. Projects that can be from $100,000 to $149,000. The board must have a public meeting about that, and there are detailed requirements for that. And that is found under 36-1-12-3B. Now, if you have a public work, it must be performed and by your own workforce. If you're going to do that, you have to have inspections exactly like you would if you had contracted it out. And they have to meet those same type of standards. So that's something to keep in mind, that we would be looking for documentation that you have done that. This one was a fun one. The law changed, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, for routine projects less than $150,000. And under this statute, it says routine operation, repair, or maintenance of existing structures and buildings may be done using your small purchasing policy procedures under IC 5-22. And the big question always is, what is routine maintenance? And we all sat around in a group going, what is routine maintenance? And there are some very specific type of guidelines in accounting when you think of routine maintenance versus something that is an actual addition to a structure or a completing of kind of a building. We have in our bulletin, in our county bulletin of October 2009, on page 3, we gave some scenarios of how that you should look at it and what we would look for to have documented to go under this statute. And generally, this would include things like replacement and repair of elevators, flooring, your roofing, but it wouldn't include things such as additions to the structures. So if you have actual structural changes, then we would question, because you're adding value. The other is maintaining the value, but if you're adding value, then you need to start thinking public work. Projects for 150,000 or more, this can be found, the requirements are under IC 36-1-12-4. And it does give all of the, lists all the things that you must follow, such as the plans and specifications required. One thing that they do bring out that we do look for when you're sending out for these different quotes is that it cannot unduly limit competition. So you can't have something so fixed in your head that you're going to say, well, we're going to just focus on this one person to be able to do this project, and so we're going to create the specifications to such a point that only they could possibly do it, unless you have some true documented evidence that that's what you need to do. Because the statute still requires, whenever possible, under whichever purchasing law that you're going with, whether it's Public Works or under IC 5-22, that you allow as much as possible competition. And that goes with your special purchasing too. You know, sometimes it is the best deal in the world. You got an auction going on and you're like, there is no way I can get this cheaper or better. And that's all you have to do is just kind of document that. And so that's all that under IC 36-4 here that they're asking for, is they're saying, look, just make sure that people understand that you're not being so restrictive that you're excluding everybody on purpose. We do mention here about General Form 96. That can be found on our website. I know we get asked about that frequently. Now, we used to have Form 95, which was just for general purchasing. That was done away with a long time ago, but we still get asked about it. So somebody asks you about 95, go, nope, that's not there anymore, but for Public Works 96, that is still applicable. This is one area that I think is just a good thing to review under statute, and it's not just your attorneys that should look at it. I think anybody that's involved in the contracting process, because again, this will be applicable whether you're looking at the just general purchasing or for Public Works, and that's the definition for responsible and responsive bidder. It is in there, it's fairly clear. The definition can be found under IC 36-1-12-4B, 10 and 11. A responsible bidder includes looking for things like the bid conforms in all material respects to what you've asked for, and that it's also complying with applicable statutes. Responsive means that the person has the ability to perform the work. So there is some that you have to look at and go, can this person do the research, figure out whether that person is actually capable? You know, do they have a lot of bad reputation, which that actually is in the law too, that you consider that. So, and the integrity of the bidder. So if there's a reputation issue going on that's documented in some way, Better Business Bureau, that type of thing, you do have a responsibility to look into that. And For this section, we're just kind of talking about the awarding process. I'll just give you the statute here. It's found under IC 36-1-12-6. We get this next question quite frequently about the bonding and the certified check. This is found under IC 36-1-12-4.5. A bond or a certified check is required from each bidder on all projects estimated to be more than $200,000. It may be required for those less than. That's your option. The amount cannot be set more than 10%. The bond work must be made payable to the political subdivision. All checks of unsuccessful bidders must be returned to that bidder upon the selection, and the check of the successful bidder is to be held until delivery of the performance bond. A payment bond, this is found under IC 36-1-12-13.1. It's required from each bidder on projects for those estimated to be more than $200,000. Again, it can be required for those that are on smaller projects. Must be equal to the contract price. It shall be deposited with the board. And 13.1 provides all of the specifications that must be in that bond. Escrow agreements can be found under IC 36-1-12-14. It provides for the detailed provisions that must be included. It's required on all projects except road, street, and bridge projects over $200,000, where a contractor subcontracts part of the work. Again, there's always the provision that it may be required for those that are less. At the discretion of the contract, the retainage may be held by the board or placed in an escrow account with a bank or savings loan in the state of Indiana, and the selection usually should be a mutual agreed upon. So change orders, that's another area that we're all asked about frequently, and that can be found under -18. What I would add to this is that you have on your screen is that all change orders must be directly related to the original project, and if additional materials are needed, the cost per unit must be same as the original contract is calling for. And then the other thing that we're asked about is that it cannot be issued before commencement of the construction unless there's an emergency. And if there's an emergency, then that needs to be documented what that emergency is. Performance bond, I'll just give you the statute for that. That's under IC 36-1-12-14E. I think we all know that this applies, the wage and scale provisions. There is also a provision for anti-discrimination, and that is found under IC 5-16-6. Now, we just don't like doing business with Iran, so here's the statute that says no. And then, of course, there are requirements that are statutory about what that buildings must meet, and so we provided those statutes. And here are the requirements for emergency and what you should have documented. And then we get into this whole thing of a design build contract. And that's a contract between a public agency and a design builder to furnish all the architectural and engineering related design services. And that is used, I don't know how frequently, but it is used. So we wanted to provide that IC quote for you. And then we have the final payment provisions so that you can find that. So I know I've just kind of flown through that, but I wanted at least that you have it in one place, that when people start asking you, because they always come to the auditor for everything, every question, and now you can pull out at least two things, one for your public purchasing and the other one for your public works, in a nice handy reference guide. Again, you guys have been great.